Hi, our topic is all about war by other means. That will be reported by Dao Peter Paul, that is me, Bariga Peter Claire, Junri Lungay, and of course, Serenil Jelly. Our topics that we're going to discuss composed of five content. First is the negotiation, second, the foreign connection, third, the initial talks, fourth, signing of the covenant, and lastly, waging peace protracts. Now, what do you think the meaning of negotiation? In this topic, we are going to define negotiation as something that we wasn't able to hear before. If war uses the force of arms to achieve both military and political objectives, a negotiation pursues the same goals through the skillful use of language and diplomacy. So if war, as once aptly put, is an extension of politics, and negotiation is an aspect of war, then negotiation is a war in another form. It is true because if both warring parties coming into a realization where they sit down and have a talk, that will lead into peace. So that is the time negotiation emerged, and negotiation is just another term of war. War is always costly, while negotiation is cheap. A day in a war is usually costlier than a month of talking. In many instances, it is true that talking is better than not talking at all. But, but negotiation can have negative impact because it can be manipulated, especially in the government aspect, because they will use negotiation to take advantage on the other parties, for them to gain time, to accumulate resources, and of course, consolidate power. There is very little reason to doubt that when the government agreed to sit down with the MNLF to talk, the grand design of the MNLF to carve an empire known as the Bangsamoro Republic was high on its agenda. Fighting was raging everywhere and sizable portion of Mindanao and Sulu was in rebel hands. The government also knew that peace achieved by violence will not last and represented only a part of the solution to the rebellion. Cut.
Now, let's talk about the foreign connection. So, international support for the Moro cause started as early as the late 1960s when reports of massacres of Moros hit world headlines. So, the first to react openly was Colonel Muammar Gaddafi, president of Libya, who said that his government will come to rescue of the Moros in Mindanao and Sulu if the mass killing of his brethren did not stop. So Colonel Muammar Gaddafi was not alone in expressing such serious concerns. Many other Muslim leaders in Asia and Africa share the same sentiments. The worldwide reaction pushed the Philippines and the Marcos regime into a precarious position because many of these states did not need the Philippines as much as she needed them. So during the killings among Moros in Mindanao, it reaches around the world because some of the states were producers of oil which Philippines needed very much.
Go.
The first foreign leader at the state level to extend concrete help to the Marcos was Tun Dato Mustafa Harun, Chief Minister of Sabah. There were many reasons why he came to rescue of the Moros. One of these was his biological, emotional, and historical connection with the Moros of Mindanao and Sulu. His mother was a Tausug and therefore he was as much a Moro as the rest of his brethren. Kuala Lumpur, Sabah is part of the Federation of Malaysia, was a major irritant between the two neighbors. The Philippines had a long-standing claim over Sabah that at one time almost led to open warfare. Sabah came to be regarded by the Philippines as part of her territory on the strength of the ownership claim of the ancient Sulu Sultanate. Kuala Lumpur never admitted aiding the Moros. The official position of Malaysia regarding the Mindanao crisis was confined confined only to actively supporting relations passed by the Organization of the Islamic Conference. In 1971, Libyan President Muammar Gaddafi openly declared his support to the Moros, who were apparently the object of the genocide campaign. In the same year, Libyan Foreign Minister Salih Boyasser came to the Philippines with a 1 million US dollar pledge of his government to bankroll the ongoing guerrilla training of the 300 Moro recruits in Malaysia. A year later, when martial law was declared, Libyan money, weapons, and other materials started to flow into the frontliners of Mindanao and Sulu. Tunku Abdul Rahman, the founding father and first Prime Minister of Malaysia, became the first Secretary General of his powerful pan-Islamic body. In May 1971, the Organization of the Islamic Conference was founded. One of its aims, as set clearly in its charter, is to strengthen the struggle of all Muslim peoples to safeguard their dignity, independence, and national rights. So, as head of OIC, he was instrumental in the support extended to the Moros by the OIC member states, especially Libya and the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. From February 29 to March 4, 1972, the Third Islamic Conference of Foreign Ministers in Jeddah Kingdom of Saudi Arabia passed as a resolution called for the review of the Muslims living in the Philippines, especially in Mindanao and Sulu. On March 24 to 26, 1973, the Fourth Islamic Conference of the Foreign Minister meeting in Benghazi, Libya, expressed deep concern over the reported repression and mass extermination of Muslims in southern Philippines and decided to send a delegation of foreign ministers from Libya, Senegal, Somalia, and Saudi Arabia. In August of the same year, the four-nation delegation visited Mindanao and Sulu. Members of the delegation were Saudi Arabian Foreign Minister Omar al-Shakaf, Libyan Foreign Minister Abdulati al-Obidi, Somalian Foreign Minister Arti Galib, and Senegal Ambassador to Egypt Mustafa Hussein. On May 29, 1974, President Marcos and President Suharto meet at Manado, North Sulawesi, Indonesia, to discuss, among the other vital Asian concerns, the Moro Rebellion. On June 21 to 25, 1974, the Fifth Islamic Conference of Foreign Ministers was held in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. It urged the government to find a political and peaceful solution through negotiation with Muslim leaders, particularly with the representatives of the Moro National Liberation Front, in order to arrive at a just solution to the plight of the Filipino Muslims within the framework of the national sovereignty and territorial integrity of the Philippines.
So let's talk about the initial talks. So on the basis of resolution number 18 approved in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, follow up to bring the two warring parties to the negotiating table rose high on the OIC agenda. At the invitation of the Philippine government, Dr. Muhammad Hassan Al-Tuhami, the new OIC Secretary General, visited in the Philippines to discuss matters in connection with the resolution. He succeeded in bringing the MNLF and the Philippine government to the negotiating table of Jeddah, Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, on January 18 to 19, 1975. The MNLF formally abandoned to pursue the independence in favor of a strong autonomous region with internal security forces. The aborted talks, after further consultations, were rescheduled to take place on April 7. It did not take place because President Marcos instead called for a dialogue in Zamboanga City from April 17 to June 30 Those invited in this dialogue were Marcos' hand-picked Muslim leaders, government officials, and the rebels. Those who rejected the nine-point agenda proposed by the OIC Quadripartite Ministerial Committee for the Resumption of the Stalled Negotiation. On October 1, the Islamic Solidarity Fund donated 1 million US dollar to the Agency for the Development and the Welfare of the Muslim in the Philippines government, which had the direction over the manner of disturbance.
Now, let's talk about the signing of the covenant. On December 15, 1976, the second round of the negotiation between the MNLF and the Philippines government took place in Tripoli, Libya. The talks were conducted in the presence of the Quadripartite Ministerial Committee or QMC. Dr. Ali Triki, the Libyan foreign minister, presided over the sprigs of meetings between the two panels, which culminated in the signing of the covenant now known as Tripoli Agreement of December 23, 1976. The agreement provided for the establishment of autonomy for 13 specified provinces and 9 cities in Mindanao and Sulu. The philosophy behind the declaration of a ceasefire is simple. Heads must cool off. Shooting must stop before the talking can proceed. It is only in the atmosphere of understanding and serenity that the search for a real peace can proceed. The meeting in Libya first stalemated and then backed out. The two panels simply could not agree on the degree and autonomy to be handed to the Moros and the definite role of the MNLF had played in it. More time had been expended on the side issues than on the substantive points. National Defense and Undersecretary Carmelo Barbero, head of the GRP, even both at the time of issue of Pelishype, which was nowhere to be located in the entire text of the agreement. A close scrutiny of the circumstances leading on the conclusion of both agreements would reveal striking similarities. As pointed out earlier, the Kiram Bates Treaty was chiefly used by the Americans to prevent the opening of another battle front in Mindanao and Sulu, while they were battling the forces of General Emilio Aguinaldo in Luzon. It was ended as a matter of temporary exigency that this treaty was conceived. 8 decades later, history seemed to have repeated itself. The pre-1977 period was really a precarious one of the Marcos region. Metropolitan Manila, the state nerve center, was becoming vulnerable to communist forces because most of the AFP combat forces were deployed in Mindanao and Sulu. The years of confrontations in the south allowed the Communist New People's Army, or NPA, to grow in size and strengthen. In fact, NPA forces were already scoring many remarkable victories in many areas in the north, and sometime the island Samar in the Visayas was practically a liberated area. This was why some army contingents were shipped back to Luzon and the Visayas immediately after the signing of the Tripoli Agreement.
Now let me talk about waging peace protracts. The Eighth Foreign Minister Conference convened in Tripoli, Libya on May 16 to 22, 1977. A historic decision was passed granting special observer status to the MNLF, an action clearly conveying additional political clout in dealing with the Philippine government. Yeah, The conference was hold the government solely responsible for the future of the negotiation in Tripoli, Libya, in February 1977, and in Manila in April 1977. The Republic of Senegal hosted the ninth Foreign Ministers' Conference at its capital, which is Dakar, on April 24 to 28, 1978. Here, the OIC denounced the Philippines for the massacres committed against the Muslims and for reneging on her international obligations to honor the Tripoli Agreement. The conference also called upon both parties to come to a ceasefire and resume negotiations. The claim of Big Bang of 1983, former Senator Benigno Aquino Jr. was shot dead on the tarmac of the Manila International Airport on August 21. The conjugal dictatorship of Marcos and Imelda was the prime suspect. Aquino was their bitter political rival. No one person or group had a greater motive to execute the assassination. Thank you.